having me here. I didn't read the directions as far as to tie, so sorry. But I'm glad to be here. Steve, I thoroughly appreciate, I don't know where he went. I don't see him, but hi, buddy. Thank you for your share. And really, I think that's all AA ever really offers is the opportunity to be comfortable wherever we're at, whether it's, in a mansion, which people have a hard time being in there too. I've seen some crazy people in mansions before, or on, the street, AA offers you an opportunity to be comfortable wherever you're at. And I'm grateful for that. That's the thing. Nobody guaranteed me anything when I got sober. They didn't guarantee me a big house. They didn't guarantee me I'd get married. I'm old now, but I was young when I got here. Believe it or not, but nobody guaranteed me anything. I took sign language. Yeah, there you go. There was a deaf guy that came up to our clubhouse in Cincinnati, and he sat there through meetings and didn't know how to say anything, to anybody. But he would be there. I'm always emotional. I cry at Walmart openings. So. It's just me. I'm oversensitive. My sponsor said I was touchy. But John would come and sit and, just listen. And then eventually I learned some sign language to get in enough trouble with him, so I end up having to learn more. But I was always impressed that he came, so thank you for the interpreters. They ended up getting an interpreter where I was, too. That was always cool. I did drink. I'll tell you a little bit about that. I grew up in Cincinnati, and really, I'm alone. It's rare. Anyway, I'm from there, and I grew up I had a mom and dad, a brother and a sister. I was adopted. I felt different when I was young. I got messed with when I was young, and I had a learning disability. And so I stood out in school because I had a learning disability. I was skinny at the time, and I went to 13 different schools before I ever graduated from high school. But I ended up graduating from high school. I ran away in the second grade because I felt different. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't function. I wondered why I was here. I didn't like that. I thought that at an early age, like, why am I here? And it's like, I don't belong here. I'm too sensitive for the world. And I kind of knew that. I was sensitive about life. I was just too much. I felt everything. And I could read people. I could see that they were phony, or when they were nice, or if a girlfriend liked me, or she said she loved me, and then it was never good enough either, It's like none of it was good enough, ever. It's like, why? I love you. Why? Tell me more. Give me more. That's how I am, man. I was just born that way. I just thought I'm goofy. Nobody taught me how to be goofy. I was goofy from the get-go. It got to a point in my life where, I didn't want to go to school, so I would skip right away, and I didn't know my right from my left, and I had that problem. And so I kind of held my arms completely still, because whatever move I made was wrong. And so I didn't move at all. And that's how I was as a kid. And at 10 years old, I got a hold of some alcohol. And it was a pint of whiskey, and I took it, and it burned going, and it burned coming, and I pushed it back down. For the first time in my life, I could breathe. And I could never breathe before that. The trees got greener. I felt at one with the world. And that's a powerful effect. And that's how I felt at 10, the first time I ever drank. Now I puked, passed out, and swore off whiskey because I thought I'll never do that again. I knew I would drink, but I knew I wouldn't do whiskey. And at 10 years old, I had met my new higher power. It was alcohol. But at 10 years older, it was hard to get a 40 or a shorty. So I had to, do other things. I know this is AA. No disrespect to the podium, but I huff gasoline. So, and I think it makes you heroin addicts look kind of wimpy to me, So stick your head in the gas can and talk to me after that, okay? And it wasn't a social thing. It wasn't, like, here, dude, hit this. It was like, it was by myself in the woods, and I would huff it until I pass out. And I come home, I'd smell like a gas can, my eyes be bugged out, and I'd be seeing floaties, my dad's like, what have you been doing? Nothing. So they got rid of the gas lawnmower and bottle electric one just to help me, And I stole the neighbor's can and did it. But as soon as I could drink, I did. I was like 13. The law was 18 in Ohio. I could drink. And I drank. I can't tell you all the schools. You know what? And if you said you have a problem with alcohol, I said you have a problem with life, period. Why are you even talking to me? I had a problem with sobriety. I had a problem being sober. There was something really wrong when I was sober. I did not like that effect called sobriety. I had a tendency to break out drunk when I was sober. Just the way it is, man. I get restless, I get irritable, I get discontented with life, with you. You got it better, you got it worse. I'm never equal to anybody. I'm always in competition with everybody and never feel like I can breathe unless I take a drink of alcohol. And then many pursue that into the gates of insanity or death. And I think one of the biggest problems that I don't know where I'm going with this at all. I can tell you this, in 2023 was a bad year for me personally. I'm glad it's 2024. I stayed sober. I stayed sane for the most part. But my business got in trouble. My finances got in trouble. My ex-wife died of an overdose in 2023. My kids were crazy in 2023. My daughter had a baby in treatment when she met a guy in treatment. I hated her for that, but when I said, "What are you doing?" and then she had this baby, and she's like, "Well, where'd you meet Mom?" Her mom was in treatment. She nailed me, man. That was good. Sometimes we forget, It's all good though, man. But it was a rough year, and I was glad, 2040. I had one day in my 50s in 2024, January 2nd, I turned 60, and I've been coming to AA since I was 19. Unreal. I haven't been sober that whole time, but I've been coming that whole time and come back, no matter what, come back. It doesn't matter. We're not here to judge anybody for what they do. I can't hear and I don't see and I don't know what my problem is. I never knew what was really wrong with me. I didn't know I was selfish. I didn't know I was self-centered. I didn't know I couldn't hear. What I found out most, and I think my ex-wife taught me better than anybody with her passing, is that we don't hear the truth when it's presented to us. We never hear it. And most of us will die that way. Unfortunately, we can't hear the truth about our condition. Or we're not willing to go to any lengths to see it. But in my experience, I think a lot of people don't hear it. That's why I like leads. Because you can hear somebody and tell their story and maybe catch something. You're like, yeah. No, not really. Yeah. Sort of like that. So I'll tell you how I got to AA. I had a job at Coca-Cola. That was my life. It was my identity. I was a Coke man. I had a Coke hat, shirt, pants, jacket. If it said Coke, I owned it. It was me. I'm a Coke man. And that's what I am. That's what I did. And that's who I was. I'm John and a Coke man. I would flash the jacket at girls thinking I'd get lucky. He works for Coke. I didn't have Coke. I just worked for Coke, I did that, and it was my identity because, I said I didn't get really an education. I did graduate from high school. Coke gave me a full-time job, and I figured I'd be a grunt the rest of my life at Coke. But I was going to move up. I worked hard, and I wanted to be there. And my parents grew up in the Depression, so I knew about holding a job. Hold a job, Johnny. That's all they wanted to do. Hold a job. That's all they cared about, is you holding a job. They didn't know nothing else. Didn't know I was crazy in the house. The house was nuts, especially sober. I would go on a scavenger hunt for money, or I'd intimidate my mom until she would give me money to drink, and then I would go. And then I would try to play a big shot, the double life, when I just did. And that's how I lived. And Well, I was starting to get in trouble with coke because I was out till 2:30 every night and I didn't want to be, and I had to be at work at 6 a.m. and I would go to the discotheques. This is the worst part of my story. I liked rock and roll, and all of a sudden I liked disco, which is not cool, really. It was weird. I mean, I was around when, Van Halen was new, and, that was cool. I liked Van Halen. I saw Van Halen in concerts, kind of. I kind of remember, but, I don't really. But I did. I saw them, and I liked Led Zeppelin. And all of a sudden, I'm listening to Michael Jackson. I'm like, what is up with this? You know what I mean? But he had a good beat, so I learned to dance. I had a hand flick, and my dad gave me a gallon beer jug, and I put it in the basement, and I drink and have my album. Some of you kids don't know what an album is, and I ain't got time to explain it to you. Just put a needle on a record, and the drum beat go like this. So I would play music. What it would do, it would play music. And so I danced, and I had a mirror, and I'd drink my beer, and I'd be like, man, you're getting better looking, more rhythm, better looking. I go to Clifton, which is up by University of Cincinnati, and they had a discotheque up there with the dance floor lit. I saw Saturday Night Fever, so I was like, man, I've arrived, this is beautiful. I get out there, all of a sudden they put on Michael. People stand right in front of the mirrors and watch themselves dance. I was never that way. I'd stand off to the side and kind of catch a glimpse of myself. I had that look that we get when we're drunk, it's kind of fun, woo, and I'm alive. And man, all of a sudden Michael Jackson come on, so I'd be out there and I could do the moonwalk. Don't ask me to, but just trust me, I can. And I did that, and I would flick myself, and I'd give a little kick like Michael, and I'd grab myself in the crotch like Michael, and I would puke on the dance floor unlike Michael. And I would start to get escorted out of bars, and and then it would be 2:30 again, and I wanted to get up at coke, and it was going over and over and over, and I didn't even know what was wrong. They would have hospital commercials on at 2:30 a.m., and there was no cell phones. You had to go to a payphone to call her at 3 a.m. You couldn't just do it from home in your room. You had to go out. Go out and use a payphone because she blocked your number. Caller ID was just starting to happen. I hate that shit. But anyway, God, I love you. Who is this? I did all that stuff. I'm telling you my story. Maybe you did it and think, why is he telling that? Maybe you didn't. Too bad if you didn't. It always brought a little extra, emotion when you would call somebody at 3 a.m. And I like sad music. I love sad music. Can't Live if Living Is Without You. That's my favorite song. Man, I used to play that over and over and just, cry, drink, cry, drink. Say if I just had a woman, I'd be all right, And then I get a warm feeling all over me because I just peed on myself. Went treatment. I'll just let you know I'm alcoholic. I think you get it now. So I went into treatment, and at 19, I was physically fried, mentally, spiritually bankrupt. I was fried. And I went in, I cried a lot in treatment. I didn't know, I thought I had emotional problems. I didn't know. They said alcoholism, your body has an allergy to alcohol. And that's, and then you have an obsession of the mind. Well, I think, I know I had obsession of the mind, but I didn't know what that was. And they said, your answer is go to AA for the rest of your life. And good luck. Wow. And don't go to this place called Oak Street. Don't go there. They hook up with each other there. They have drugs there. They have all kinds of things go on at this Oak Street place. So I went to Oak Street. I was like, oh. That's when I was new. They'd be like, they tell the new girl, stay away from John, And the new girl would come over and see what she should stay away from. That's the wrong thing to tell people, Just let them figure it out themselves, Anyway, so I had that reputation too. I was one of them people that, I didn't know what I was doing in AA, and that's the way it was. I was 19, 20. You're going to do it in a bar. You're going to do it in AA. I might get all mine in AA, man, right in Front Street, People still remember it. Some people still judge me for it. I don't really care. I'm sober today by God's grace. My life has changed. I'm willing to grow along spiritual lines today. I'm willing to put the effort into doing the work in Alcoholics Anonymous to stay sober, and I'm keeping my seat here. And you don't have to like me. And that's what I found out too. Not everybody's going to like you, and you don't have to like everybody. But you have to love them. You have to love them. And if they go out, I had a guy, like I said, I'm jumping all over. I had a guy when I drank after 7 years. I got sober when I was 20 and drank when I was 27. And it was difficult to come back. I had an attitude. Alcohol was on. My mom was dying of cancer. I moved home to be helpful. At 27, I was an alcoholism counselor when I drank. I was one of them. I could quote the big book verbatim, and I would try to impress you with my knowledge of AA, like anybody really cared. The new girl would be like, hey, how you doing? I'd be like, hey, rarely have we seen a person fail who's so and I could quote the whole thing at him, just couldn't live it, And so I ended up getting drunk at 27, and I never wanted to be drunk in front of my mom again. I ended up drunk in front of my mom again. She was dying of cancer. She sits me down at the kitchen table, and she says, what am I doing that's making you drink? And I said, man, it ain't you. It's the first time I knew it. I felt terrible. I was like, this ain't you, it's me. And I knew it was me for the first time. And that's the effect that my alcoholism had on my mother. I blamed her and she blamed herself. Terrible, man. But I got to make it right. I got away from her that night and I went, I don't know where I went. I went somewhere, but this guy in AA was trying to, come on, John, come back to AA, come back to AA, come back to AA, come back to AA. You're just interfering with my drinking here, buddy. You go back to AA. And so he ended up drinking with me, and that was fun. I never wanted to be drunk with anybody from AA, and there I was, we're together. What do we want to do? Rob a bank. Cool, let's do it. That's the way what happens, we don't think that way. I wouldn't want to watch job rob the bank because it seemed like a good idea at the time, but that's the kind of stuff that goes through your head or whatever. So he ended up getting arrested. I took his car, his credit card, his wallet. He said, you can bail him out in the morning. And I was like, I'll be right there. I went to a bar I grew up in where my dad was a bartender. I was going in there since I was 5, and they bring up the money from the night before. My mind says, there's your drinking money, now get it. And for whatever reason, I didn't steal it, but I was going to. My head was crazy. The racing from alcoholism, man. The terror, bewilderment, frustration, despair, everything's on top of me right then. I was drunk for a day and a half, and I couldn't get drunk. I drank myself sober. I hated that. I'm like, man, I can't even get drunk. I was drunk, but in the head, I was sober. And I was faced with the 4 horsemen. And I swore off AA. Because you go back, people ain't always kind. You'd be like, they look at you. Get in your face. How was it? I'm like, do we do that to people in cancer wards? I don't think we do. No, we don't. We do it here, though. How was it? Huh? One guy said, how was it? I said, well, if you got a question about your drinking, why don't you go try it? You see where I'm at, dude. I was a little feisty, And the other one I loved is, they come up all serious. Thanks for drinking for me. Oh, that's nice. Didn't know you were thinking about drinking again, buddy, It was just, I didn't like AA. I was really tired. I didn't like the people. They were nasty. Some of them were I was super sensitive. And it's not easy walking back in here, man. Especially after 7 years and being a counselor. I didn't want to come back to AA. I was a counselor, man. I want to save face and look good in a coffin. I was just going to die. I plan on dying. I'm not going back to AA. And I lied to myself. I got up and I went to Kentucky where liquor's cheaper. I tried to find me a bottle of Wild Irish Rose. They didn't have it. And I went to a clubhouse called 531 Russell Street. And I wasn't planning on going in there. And that was December 11th, 1991. 32 years I've been sober. We're not planning on, don't woo, because I didn't plan on it, you know. I just ended up in AA. It was by God's grace. And all of a sudden I could hear that day, where I 7 years sober, I couldn't hear. But whatever happened in that drinking interment, I could hear. I heard about it. I heard about the unpredictability of drinking. I got with my sponsor. Who's got the card? So who am I watching for, the card? Don't you even raise the card on me, my man. Anyway, but I got with my sponsor, and he said, how we doing? How much time do I have?
About 15 minutes.
15? Oh, I'm going to slow it on down then, buddy. I'm John Alcoholic. Anyway, I met do-over. So I got with my sponsor. Well, first day, I got with this guy, this dude I had in treatment, dude. We called him Bobby Dude. He was like, hey, dude. What's up, dude? He played guitar, you know. Dude, Bobby Dude. I thought he was dead. And this past year, he called me. Hey, John, what's up, dude? I said, Bobby, dude, you're alive. You know, I thought you were dead. Anyway, but he took me around that whole day. I was his counselor in treatment. And that night, I got with this, my sponsor. And, man, I said, hey, Mike, man. I said, alcohol's the boss. I said it out loud. I said, alcohol's the boss. He said, Johnny, alcohol has always been the boss. It'll always be the boss when it comes to an alcoholic. And it was true. It was like Bill's story, for real. He talked about alcohol being his master. Alcohol was my master, and I said it out loud. I wasn't thinking of Bill's story. I just said it because it was true. And I got with my sponsor. He said, I saw you try to make your life happen. Are you ready to let life happen to you instead of trying to make it happen? I said, I don't know, man. I didn't know. He said, Monday night we go to Lebanon Penitentiary. Why don't you go along? Bill was there. My buddy Bill Weber was there. And I was like, man, I don't know. And he said, just come. And I went up to Lebanon Penitentiary, and I said, what kind of meeting is it? This is a maximum secure prison. He said, it's a speaker meeting. I said, well, who's talking? And they said, well, you are. Well, you're locked up. I said, well, I really don't have anything to say, you know. He said, well, just tell them what it's like to be 5 days sober. And I did. And you got a story when you're new, man. You got a story right from the beginning. You got a story. You know where the meeting is. You know where this meeting is. You got an experience already. You've been here. You can bring somebody back. You can come back. You know where this meeting is. And I cried in that penitentiary about drinking again. I mean, I just did. And they 12-stepped me. You know, they were, man, you need to keep coming back here. You're a mess, you know. And I would go back every Monday. And I went and did that. And I felt more comfortable in institution meetings than I did in the regular meetings because of people. I didn't know what they would say. You know, I didn't like having to deal with people. Hey, did you hear about that guy? This girl in the hallway said, you hear about that guy? John that drank after 7 years? I'm like, yeah, it was me. Yeah, I heard about it. Felt it too, you know. She didn't bother me though, man. But, you know, I was so sensitive. So if you're new and you're sensitive in A, go to an institution meeting. Go to a psych ward where you fit in, you know. It's cool. It's awesome. Man. You can go to a psych ward, you know. Like, no, you're not gonna stand out there. You'll be fine, you know. I did the drop-in center, which is the homeless shelter. I did that. Every Sunday night, I did the drop-in center. Every Friday, I did the detox meeting. And every Monday, I went to the penitentiary. Every Monday. And I got to make amends to my mom. And my mom didn't want to hear I was sorry. I did my inventory. I can tell you this. I did all my inventory and stuff. And it came time for the amends. And that was rough. I didn't know how to, I didn't know, you know, my mom was dying. And, you know, she was tired of hearing my sorries. You know, I'm sorry, give me $20. That's about how my sorries were, you know. And so she, I never said I was sorry. I just took care of her before she passed away. And I thanked her for being a good mom, because she really was. And I thanked her for her love, and she really gave it in her own way. And I was at peace with my mom. And the night before she died, I knew my mom had 24 hours to live because I called the doctor. And he said, well, he just saw her. He's like, your mom's got about 24 hours to live. And I called my sponsor, and I said, they just told me my mom's got 24 hours to live. He said, it's a Monday night, we go to the penitentiary. And I said, well, I want to be here when my mom dies. He said, well, if you're supposed to be there when your mom dies, you will be. If you're not, you won't be. Do AA. And I went to the penitentiary meeting, knowing that my mom might die while I was gone. I got inside the penitentiary meeting. It was a discussion meeting. Anybody got a topic? My sponsor was so nice. John does. And I said, well, they just told me my mom's got 24 hours to live. And then these guys went around the room and shared their experience about losing their loved one in a state penitentiary. You are state property. You could either go to the funeral or you could go to the visitation or the deathbed, but you're not going to get to do everything. And if they die out of state, that was too bad. You don't get to do nothing. And so right there, I knew I had a gift. What really touched me more than any other guy in the penitentiary was one guy said, the only experience I had with death, he goes, with my wife. He goes, I killed her. And true story. He says, sometimes I get so pissed off, I want to dig her up and shoot her again. Damn. Hallelujah, brother. But it showed me something about resentment. It's in us. It's not in them. She's dead. He's still pissed. It's always in us. It's never in them, man. It's always us. You know? And I found out it was me. I went home that night. My mom was still alive. And she said, Johnny, you and I have come a long way. And I watched her take her last breath the next day. I was living with my dad after that for a couple of years. I never really knew my dad. I was busy with my mom trying to get her money. So I didn't know him, you know. He was a nice guy, man. He was funny. He was a good dude. I lived with him for a couple of years. I was probably 29 when he passed away. I got sober when I was 27, so I was probably 29 when he died. And I got to stay with him for a couple of years. The night before he died, we were watching Saturday Night Live, you know, and they were doing this skit called The Pepper Boy. It was Pepper Boy. It was Chris Farley, and it was Adam Sandler. And then we were laughing. And I thought, man, I had this feeling come over, like I really like hanging out with my dad. I went to bed, got back up, kissed my dad on the forehead, and said, I love you. Last thing I ever said to him, I found him dead the next day. And I thought, man, all this time, this years later, it's a couple years ago, Adam Sandler was doing his comedy tour around with a tribute to Chris Farley. And I was fortunate enough, I have a limousine service or whatever, but we got to take care of Adam Sandler. I'm not dropping names. Oh, did you really? Yes, I did. But, which was cool. And I tried, don't be funny, John. That's all I thought. Don't be funny, because, just don't. And, but anyway, then he was on TV. I was waiting for the Netflix thing to come out, and he was on TV. And then he talked about that Pepper Boy skit. And I'm like, damn, and I remember that was what I listened to with my dad when he passed away. So it was kind of a cool little memory that came back. So what is it like today? Well, it sucks. No, it doesn't. Circumstances can never define you in Alcoholics Anonymous, and that's when I found out. It'll help you grow, but it can never define you, And that's the one thing I've learned probably more in this past year than anything else, and that we have a story, that we all have a story, and it's really important to listen to people when they tell their story, because you have to become a listener before you become a talker. Really, you kind of do. And I had to learn how to listen to people, and I would listen to people, and I would feel better when I left the meeting, or I would talk to people and ask them about themselves, like, what do you do, or what, whatever, what brought you to AA, and then you listen, and then when you leave, you feel better. It's a design for living that works. But you can't get it by osmosis, because I tried. I tried to get it by osmosis. I became a father sober. Yeah, finally somebody said, okay, let's get married. She was in a halfway house for women that wouldn't go all the way, so I took her all the way and married her. It was right after my dad died. I was about 3 years sober, I think, when I married her. And I love to talk to her on the phone in treatment. Love to call her, man. And she'd call me back when it was her turn for the phone. That's love, man. That's dedication, man. And I took her out of the treatment center, had her move in with me, got married the same day. I called a friend of mine who got married like 7 times. Like, real quick, he met a girl, married her, and then he'd get divorced. So he'd been married like 7 times. I didn't call my sponsor to get married. I called this guy, Jim. I said, hey, Jim, I want to marry this girl. What do you think? Well, come over to my house. I'll get a cake. You get a wedding ring. You do what to do. He gave me direction, so I followed it. And lo and behold, we were married. And I didn't even know how to spell her name. I really didn't. And we were together maybe 6 weeks. But I didn't. Don't you do that to me. I wouldn't want anybody else to marry her or go out with her. See, I was afraid, so, marry him up real quick, because I'm afraid. And so I married her, and, man, all of a sudden she gets pregnant. I don't know what happened there, and then I became a father. All of a sudden I'm a father, and I have this daughter. Her name is Michaela, and I picked her up, and I thought, I'll do anything to protect you forever, Michaela. I'll do anything for you, And then we split up because she was standing in front of the door, and I'm like, I'm going out. I'm going to go to a meeting. No. I'm like, yeah. No. Yeah. And I put her out of the way. I did. Pushed her out of the way so I could get to a meeting. Now, I didn't want to be that way. I didn't want to live that way. And I don't want to fight anybody ever, ever. I'm not a fighter. And she wanted to fight all the time. And I don't want to fight. So I left. And then we started talking again. Why don't you come home? I came home. Out came Katie. And 30 days after Katie was born, we got divorced. And they were little. And she married some guy real quick and said, this is your new dad. And they moved to Cleveland. That's why I don't like when I see Brown's shirt. That's sort of like the guy that killed his wife. I want to do it again. I got it, And I spotted you right away, dude. I'm like, but anyway, so they moved to Cleveland. And, man, my life ended up getting turned upside down. And I thought, I was at 7 years sober. And I'm like, oh, my God, here it comes again. I'm dead beat. And I didn't drink. At 10 years sober, I ended up losing everything. I had a cleaning service. It went under. I'm broke, and I'm like, my child support is $2,000 a month, $1,000 each kid. Don't ever get a lawyer from AA; they don't do you well. And so I think he liked her, Anyway, so it was, and then when I went back to court to lower it, they would not lower it, and I lost everything. And I was living with my buddy that got drunk with me. Living in his basement. He says, you have to move. I'm moving in Katrina. She's got 4 kids, and you got to go. It was right before Christmas. I'm like, can I be one of the kids? He's like, you got to go. I was homeless at 10 years sober. Now, I knew Florida was here. I also know people that moved here. And I was like, they moved back. Florida didn't work. So you can't change where you live because of who you are. I said, but now I don't know anybody that's ever went to California. I'm going to do that. So I packed my stuff and I moved to L.A. And I went out there and I went to see Clancy. If anybody knows who Clancy is, I went to see him at the Mission. And I said, Clancy, this happened. I'm crying. And he's like, oh, that's a tough deal, kid. Are you going to go to the Wednesday night meeting? Yeah, I'll see you there. I thought, man, I just drove 3,000 miles for what, this? But I would go to his group. It was an active group. They would take care of each other. Everybody had a job in the meeting. They played softball on Saturdays, the fellowship, the speakers, everything was phenomenal. My favorite speaker when I got sober was Norm Alpe. I listened to him morning, noon, and night. I listened to Norm. And I went to California, and I met people that Norm sponsored, like Johnny Harris and other people. And man, it was just magic that would happen there. And I would be living in my car in Toluca Lake, which nobody knows where that is, but it's where Bob Big Boy, first Bob Big Boy ever was. So I went there, I slept in the parking lot, and it was what I did. And I got involved in the Pacific group, and I stayed sober, and I stayed 2 minutes, all right. I stayed sane, and, I got through it, and I got to be at peace, really with my ex-wife before she died, the best I could with her. And, I'm at peace with my kids most of the time, but they've been riddled with alcoholism, so it's kind of, and it shows, man. If there's anything I hope you do, is I hope you get a tattoo like mine, that's Clancy, on my arm, and it says AA Liquor, and it was a real picture of him outside a liquor store in California, and that's how much I respected the man, is I put him on my arm forever. He hasn't killed me yet, so, All right. Well, thank you, guys. I appreciate y'all. Thank you.
We have passed the basket in accordance with the seventh tradition. Also, a second basket went around for the ASL donations. You can pick up meeting sheets at the podium after the meeting. Let's give